Okay, I believe I am live now. Okay, so today we're going to talk about resource guarding in dogs. So I'm going to be sharing my screen just because, let me put this on percent mode. There's a nice video on here that shows a good example of resource guarding. This isn't necessarily something you have to train your dog on unless they're already having issues, but this is a good thing to be aware of when you have puppies, that maybe you can try and get them to not end up having this issue. The problem with resource guarding, a lot of times it's genetic, and there's not so much you can do it, but let's just kind of get back to the basics. So resource guarding is when a dog guards an item they consider high value, and it's very common in dogs. It can be toys, it can be food, it can be people, it can be spaces, it can be anything. Usually though, it's food or toys for the most part. Resource guarding can be between two. A dog could be guarding it just from dogs, or they could guard it from people. That doesn't necessarily overlap. There can be dogs that only guard it from people, and then there's some dogs that only guard it from dogs. For instance, one of my dogs, he guards toys and food and everything from other dogs, but he'll let me take anything from him. So they don't always overlap. So today we just kind of wanted to talk about this because this is a common issue that people run into, and I just wanted to give some tips on how to manage it and how to deal with it and how to recognize it. If you have a puppy right now, it's really good to start working on with food with them, so in hopes if they do end up having this issue with your when they're older, then you can maybe help combat it while they're young and still in that socialization period. So resource guarding is exactly what it sounds like. They're guarding that item. Usually when they are guarding it, they get really stiff. Their eyes get really big. They might growl, they might snap, they might bark at you, and then a lot of times they might even bite you. So I'm going to play this video that shows this right now. So right now he's guarding this little toy from this person. So every time that person comes up, watch his eyes, how you see the whites in his eyes. And he gets, he'll chew it, but as soon as that person comes close, he gets really still and stops, and he'll stare her down. So now he's growling at her. His tail is rising, which is not necessarily the best thing. And again, you keep seeing those whites in the eyes. He chews it and chews it. But if she gets too close, he'll get really stiff and stop. So, yes, that's just a little classic example of resource guarding. That's not the worst I've ever seen. That's actually, he's giving decent warnings. Some dogs, unfortunately, their warnings might not be that obvious, but that's when you run into a lot of issues. Usually we see those things in more extreme cases. That's not always the most common. It's usually the most of the time they'll growl at you or they get really stiff. So let me go back to exit mode, and let me go to this. Okay, please ignore the rest of this. This was our document for training at the shelter. So when managing resource guarding, so much of it is genetic. So a lot of it isn't something that you necessarily can change your dog to not do entirely. It's natural for animals to want to guard their items in the wild because there's limited resources. So we've domesticated dogs enough to where it's not as obvious in animals and the dogs that we domesticate, but there still is there. And usually it's just a genetic thing that's always going to be there because it's just left over from their long ancestors when they used to not be domesticated. Because if you think about it, if you're out in the wild and you have limited food, you are going to guard the stuff that is going to keep you alive. So how to manage it is really just you try and work with the dog. One thing is, if they ever get a hold of an item that they guard, if it's food or something, do not try and take it. You don't want to try and play alpha and show them who's boss and try and take it from them, because that is going to get you bit. Just let them go. And you can try and use like something, a high value treat or a toy or something to get their attention and get them distracted, and maybe throw it so they go chase after it and leave the other item they're guarding and then pick up that item that they've been guarding instantly. Like some dogs, like they might guard a rawhide bone. So I'll get like some food that they can eat really fast and I'll throw it. They'll go chase after that and they'll eat it, and I'll grab that bone and then they'll eat that and it will go away, so they can't guard that item I just threw, and then I'll get rid of that rawhide. I see this sometimes when people take their animals for walks and maybe there's a chicken bone on the side of the road or something like that. if your dog gets it and your dog has resource guarding, just let them have it. I know that sucks. Chicken bones can cause issues, but it's just not worth getting bit. Just let them have it. So there's other ways you can work with it too, though. Food. When you're feeding their meals, they need to work for that food. They need to understand that you're the one that's feeding them. So I would suggest hand feeding them, making them sit and wait. And they cannot touch that food unless you give them permission. Wait is a really good skill for these animals, because if you're in the kitchen and you're cooking and you happen to drop something, you want them to know that wait command perfectly, because you could tell them to wait so you could get the item before they do. That way it's not a battle. So definitely work on your wait. We've done some previous videos on that. Another thing is, if your dog guards other things, like maybe they guard a couch or a bed, do not let them have that as a privilege anymore. Do not allow them on the couches. Do not let them on the bed anymore. I know that's hard. A lot of us want to have animals close by us. We want to love on them. But if they're guarding those things, they cannot have that. Like, you just have to take it away. Because that's going to get you in trouble. You don't want to be sleeping with them and they decide they want to bite you at that moment, because that's, unfortunately, dogs are not safe. It's not safe for you to have that in your home environment. Another thing is, teach your dog a game of fetch and drop. It's also, and we can show this again a little bit later on. This is just another way to help get your dog to drop the item if they have something that you want. Earlier, I was talking about using food or something to lure them away from it. But if you teach them just a simple game of fetch and drop, that's another way to get to that. Whenever you have people come over, anyone in your family, anything like that, you need to make sure that they know these rules. There's not exceptions. It's not like one person can get away with it, someone else. Just have the rules flat across the board. That's like the best thing you can do. And another thing is, anytime you want something from your dog, I would definitely have them sit for a command, just to keep that that you're in charge, that they're working for you, and that they're the dog and you're the person. Okay, so let me go back into my other slide. Let me find it. I don't know that it's in here. So this is called the Game of Mine. This is from Awesome Pets Alive. This is a good just little example on how they work with, and I'll post this as well in here too, so you can watch it separately. But this is just a good way to also help combat resource guarding. And we won't watch the whole thing because it's pretty long. But I will just get to a little clip of her working with the dog, and I'll show you, and then you guys can watch this later on. So I just want to show you where she gets to the point. Hold on, I gotta find it. So what she's doing here is she's making he has to sit there and wait before he ever gets over to where the item of the treat is. Let me mute this so I can talk. So she's going to have food over here, and then she's going to make him wait before he's able to get it. So that's what it means, the Game of Mine. The item is hers, and he's not allowed to get to it until she's given him permission, basically. So she's going to start doing it again. She was just loving on him. She's still loving on him. Hold on. There you go. Usually with resource guarding, I feel like the most common times people have issues with it is when they're cooking and they drop something, or when they go on walks and the dog gets something they shouldn't have. So just if you can prepare them with knowing their drop it commands, or leave it, or wait, or simply like this, a Game of Mine, that's going to be your best bet of combating it. You can always hire a trainer and see if there's more things you can do, but a lot of it's ultimately going to be managing, unfortunately. You can try medications to help, and sometimes it helps, but usually I find medications help more with like stranger danger and other issues. But yes, okay, so I'll post this after so you guys can watch this. It's a little longer, so I won't talk through it. But yes, okay, so let me go back. I'm afraid to exit out of this because I'm afraid it's going to close the entire thing. I'm going to do it. Okay. Okay, so one last thing I do want to say, that just some interesting statistics about resource guarding that I thought was interesting. I really hope this is still going live because I don't see any comments. I don't know. I don't know. Okay. An interesting fact about resource guarding. A long time ago, in shelters, they used to do this hand feeding test with dogs. They would put a food bowl like this, and they would have they would let the dog eat out of it, and they'd take a fake hand and put it down it, and if the dog would try and bite it, they would say that was resource guarding. The problem was they started to learn that because of the stress in the shelter, many times the dogs would do that in the shelter, but when they would get in home, they didn't. They did studies where they would test them at the shelter and see how they acted, and then once they've been in a home for a while and established, to see if those behaviors were still there. The dogs that showed resource guarding in the shelter, 50% of them did not in the house, and then the 25% that did not show it at the shelter did in a house. So if the dog has been at the shelter and you're adopting from them and they're telling you that they tested like this, it's a very old way of testing, but there are still some people that some old style shelters that do it. Definitely find out where they got the information from, because if they're doing the hand test, it's not completely accurate. So yeah, gosh, I really hope this is live. Sorry, I don't know how to tell. Okay, so that was everything. If you have questions, go ahead and comment below. This is the first time I went live on my computer, so I'm sorry this is a screw up. So yes, ask any questions and I would be more than happy to help you. Thank you. Bye.